Well, hello, welcome back to Elevate Ordinary. I'm your host, JonMarc Grodi.
And I'm Teresa Grodi.
And we're back with another extraordinary conversation about the ordinary pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty. Thanks for being here again with us for this. This is the second part of our three-part episode on homeschooling, talking about homeschooling, mindset, education, our experiences. Hopefully they're helpful to you. Dedicating this episode to my mother, who homeschooled me and showed me that it was possible, and also gave Teresa that pretty cool sweater she's wearing. So there you go, Mom. This one's for you. Appreciate all you've done. So, and Dad too. Yeah, my parents both contributed to my homeschooling education.
And the sweater.
And
probably.
the sweater in different ways. Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. So we talked last time. Let me think. Where we go last time? We kind of gave a snapshot. I mean, we explained at the beginning that obviously our goal here on this episode, these series of episodes, this show, like we're not lecturing you. We're not trying to be the end all be all.
But we're not making an argument for homeschooling.
No, yeah, we're not trying to make
like,
the end all be all case here.
This is season 4, I guess.
Yes.
However we break up season.
We didn't say it. We declared it.
So that's what makes
4.
seasons nowadays.
Yes.
And like we always kind of throw it in there like, oh yeah, we homeschool and whatever. Or we unschool or we something or other.
Through it a bit.
Classical education, this, whatever. So we decided that at some point we just had to bite the bullet and do a homeschooling episode or 3.
And it's bound up. I mean, as you heard in the last one, you'll hear in this one, like it's bound up a lot with what we talk about much more frequently in all episodes of our show, just in terms of, really, I mean, the show title, Elevate Ordinary. Our show is all about looking at the ordinary aspects of life, bringing them out, having a good conversation about them, to find the opportunities that God is giving you to be a saint, to grow in virtue, to really to build up the treasure that He's given you to do. And so, family life, marriage, parenting, schooling, the basic parts of life. A lot of times they're just the things that we kind of muddle through, and the real important stuff is out there. And we're saying exactly the opposite. No, this is the meat, your marriage, your family relationships, your culture. And for us, homeschooling is just this way that it's very valuable to us, this way that we're able to live family life, live a life of learning together with our kids that we really value, because we're also lifelong learners. I mean, we're readers, we're talkers. I mean, that's, again, really the basis of this show is our love of gabbing about things that we're passionate about and exploring together.
And our love of our relationship. So homeschooling is a natural extension for us of how much we love to talk to one another, how much we love to discover, how much we love to learn with each other. We love analyzing things and pulling apart literature and all the things, and considering life and thinking about virtue and making new habits. So it's a nice extension of our marriage.
And our hope would be, that even if you're not a homeschooler now, and maybe you are planning on becoming one, at least our hope would be that through these episodes, through our experiences, that you'd at least have the freedom to know that it's an option for you. Like you could do it if you wanted to. If you decided it was best for your kids, if your current schooling situation is not working for you, you could do it. It's actually not as hard. It's not as complicated as you think it is. And there's a lot of benefits to be had there, number one. But then also number 2, like hopefully, like you can think through your own mindsets in terms of your parenting and of what education is and of your family culture and family relationships, so that even if you are, sending your kids to a school, that maybe you have some encouragement and pointers that are helpful to you in terms of building your family culture, even in the midst of that. That would be our hope with those 2 things.
Yeah. And maybe if you had an exposure to homeschooling like I did as a kid, which was when we talked about truancy in school and what would happen if you didn't go to school. And they said when some people homeschool their kids for religious reasons, and those kids have to shut their windows during the day so that no one sees that they're home from school, or they'll get a call from the truancy officer. And when they go out, they have to wear name tags and uniforms. And I was just like, who would do that? That's insane.
Really
those people are insane.
Wow.
Well, this is what I was told in the 90s.
I'm sure there are some parts of the world where that's a thing.
And that's like, well, I think your mom's generation dealt with a lot of that stuff. And I think that's why a lot of people moved out to the country when they homeschooled. Whereas like our neighbors are right up in our faces while we're homeschooling all day.
Yeah.
And there's no question that our kids are home all day. Like, there's no question about it. It's very loud. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this episode, we wanted to focus on, when we were talking about how are we going to do a homeschooling episode, because we just want to touch on it because we mention it and we do it. And I think it's a thing in people's heads.
It's a helpful exercise in thinking through it and talking through it.
Yeah. And I was thinking when I was cooking the other day that like homeschooling is really about three things, fundamental, like a successful supported homeschool. And one is learning your child. Two is learning yourself. Okay. You and your spouse are learning yourselves. And three, learning your environment, your own particular environment, your home life, your work obligations, what that means for your own culture and your family life, and what things are available to you. So learning your environment. And so those are really the three things for a successful homeschool. Everything else is secondary. Curriculum is secondary, where you do your homeschooling, if you have a cute homeschooling room or if you do it around the kitchen table, all of those things, extracurricular activities, sports and stuff, socialization. I don't hear that one a lot anymore. We didn't even get one question about socialization because I think that is a myth that is so far dispelled. It's ridiculous. Yeah. But I think when it comes down to just having a successful homeschooling situation, learning your child, learning yourself, and learning your environment. So let's start with learning your child.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So the situation in which this comes up the most for me, okay, because I talk to a ton of moms about homeschooling, moms who are curious, moms who are upset currently and wish they could just not send their kids to school, parents during the pandemic who are like faced with homeschooling now, and people who are just, having their first kid and they're just not ready to seed. They're realizing that their child is going to go to preschool and kindergarten and that they're just not ready to give up what they're seeing and the interaction that they're having with their child. So this is like the most common situation I address. And people are like, okay, what do I do? What's the first thing? What does your day look like? What does your curriculum look like? Or I'm going to pull my kid out of the school. What curriculum should I use for the transition to be good? And 100% of the time, this is not what people want, but this is the answer I give. Okay. Unschool. Okay. Don't do anything. De-school. Don't do anything. De-school. If you're taking your kid out of the system, if you have a school system mindset, you need to de-school. Okay. You need to just have nothing on your plate for you and your kid. And you need to, if you got an older kid, ask that kid, what museum do you want to go to? What park do you want to go to? What thing do you want to go to? And then just have some carefree timelessness with your kid. Could be a week, it could be a month, it could be half a year, and just learn that kid.
Yeah.
So this is advice that I give to people. Yeah, this is not advice I'm giving to you right now.
Sure. Well, this is one of those barriers, and we saw this last year or a few years ago during the pandemic when there were school closures and kids were out of school for a couple of weeks, and you'd hear commentators in the media like, "Oh, what's going to happen to the children?
They're going to be behind for
a few weeks of school, or a month of school. They're going to be forever.
They'll never catch up."
And like from our perspective, we're like, "That what a ridiculous," because if you think about education that way, as if that like one day of sitting in classrooms, or missing a week of that or a few weeks of that is going to like impair your child. Yeah, that's a pretty big intimidating barrier to this idea that you might school your kids at home. But you have to recognize that, like, no, you can take your kids out of school and you can take some time. Like, it's not the kids are always learning. They're constantly learning, even when they don't mean to, right? Like, so, like just being in your family, just living family life, just doing activities together, the kids are learning. They're never not learning. And so you don't have, if you pull back from a formal school system, you don't have to suddenly replace it instantly with another formal structure. You can take time and just let them learn organically and read. And again, as in the topic that we're talking about right now, get to know them and their learning style and what they're interested in. Like, you can take that time and you know what? They're going to be just fine.
Yeah. And hatred of learning is learned.
That's good.
So if you take a kid out,
is learned.
If you take a kid out and they like don't want to do math, I hate math, I hate phonics, I hate, you don't have to, like that's learned, right? So if you take time and let the kid explore, like I mentioned, go to a lot of museums or parks or ask them what they want to do. If they want to go to the skate park, if they want to go to the Pokemon thing, okay. Even if it's self-directed, there's plenty of learning that goes on. If you're going to, say, a Pokemon trading card event, they have to interact with other people. They need to be respectful. They're going to have wins and losses in the trading.
Negotiate. They need
they might have big feelings to overcome. It's like there's never an opportunity that's not they're growing and learning from. So, but learning your child. Okay, we were talking about in our last episode that like our bribes are different when it comes to reading for different kids. Sorry, our carrot that we dangle in front of them to learn to read is different from every child because we've learned our child. Right. And that was a hard learning curve at first to go from a child that was highly incentivized with physical things to a kid who was highly incentivized by praise, and then, I just assumed because I was motivated by my education, by this lofty goal of education and being president or being something, you know what I mean? That every kid was going to be motivated by these great ideals. But the reality, some kids are motivated by a half hour of video game time, or they're motivated by purchasing something, they really want a thing and they want to purchase it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so it's
or
like
it's the love languages thing. Like what really touches them. I also want to again, talking about, again, a learned hatred of learning or like negative feelings or ideas or mindsets about learning. Those kids don't start with those. Those are derived from, and oftentimes very unintentionally, just they're having a bad experience of education. And again, that may not be anybody's fault. That just may be just what happened. But again, if you are moving towards homeschooling or into that situation, you can take time to try to learn about that. Like figure out what's the mental block here. What's the pain point here? I mean, just an example. I think for many kids in the school system, one of the things that makes them hate education is that they just never really learned to read well. They learned enough to read a menu and to text back and forth, but language is not something that's comfortable and fun and enjoyable to them because they only learned it enough to be proficient, but not to kind of excel in it. That's one of the reasons why we talked about last time. We really emphasize working on reading as like the sole main thing first in education to get them really, really comfortable with it. Because once reading is easy and enjoyable, then everything else, I mean, that's just greasing the groove for anything else they might learn.
And there's a lot of fear that's associated with that, especially with like a type A person, okay? Like myself. I have had to like shut my mouth and like hold on to the chair and be like, yes, child, you can read that fantasy novel for the 40th time. Go right ahead. When you've got these young kids who just want to sit all day and read, okay, I want to be like, okay, you've read that. You've accomplished it. Let's talk about what it's about. Let's analyze it. And then we're going to move on to the next book in your grade level. Okay. And as soon as I start to do that, like they literally, I've had like, this has happened many times. They hide the book. I don't know where it went. And I guess I have to read this. So for a while, I'm just like, well, no, they need to be punished. They need to this, and yes, if you do something intentional lying, there's consequences. Okay. But like, is it really worth it to move along this, I don't know, this curriculum I got and tell them what they're going to read if all it teaches them at this point in these young ages, okay, I'm talking young ages, to hate reading.
Yeah.
To hate reading time. Oh, I hate sitting on the couch and reading. I hate this book. Like I would rather have them love reading, get into it. Like we started this thing now where we just like keep their school books kind of out or the books I want them to read, like kind of out where they can see them. And library basket or library shelf. And eventually they do. Like they get bored and they look and they like pick something out. And it's like, okay, we got this book done.
Yeah.
So instead of keeping a to read list, a lot of times I'll keep a list of books read.
Yeah. Well, I want to elaborate on that example a little bit too. Again, yeah, I think early on we decided, we were going to get them reading, and then let them lead a lot in terms of what they read, because our emphasis was more on just getting them reading and making it just part of the air they breathe, and then be a bit more gentle and slow with, pushing them to read more difficult things. Now we did do that, and the way that I've handled that over the years, one of the things I've done is, for instance, like every day, I think last year we were real strict with this, is that every day they needed to sit down and read for actually two half an hours. We kind of worked up to this over time, but for most of that time they could read whatever they wanted, as long as it was a chapter type book, like a non-picture book. And then I would give a couple books that we'd assigned to them, but those they would just read in small chunks. So they might read one chapter out of this. My oldest son has been reading Peter Kreeft books the last couple of years, and that's pushing him a little bit beyond his years, beyond his his reading level comfortably. So we do it in small chunks alongside all of his other fun reading. And what that's resulted in him is it slowly accustoms him to a higher reading level, a higher comprehension level. And just early last year, kind of out of nowhere, he happened to pick up a Sherlock Holmes novel and ended up reading our whole hardbound set of Sherlock Holmes novels. And those are those are hard books. I don't think I ever got through this. So the point is, again, like, if you can do that gently so that reading becomes something that's just easy and enjoyable, you've eliminated one of the big potential barriers to making education enjoyable, just something that's just part of life, rather than this annoying thing I have to get through, right?
And the reason we brought up reading in this particular section, learning your children, is that you can learn a lot about your children's learning style by just watching what they read and what they gravitate towards, and the books that they don't like, and like, well, why didn't you like this one? Or why didn't, why did you stop reading this one? So there's a lot of, you can learn your kids that way. So another thing, so when you're watching your child and you have a mind towards virtue, okay, so we talk about virtues a lot. We have tons of episodes on virtues. So go back through and take a look at those if you're interested.
Primary lenses for looking at things in this show.
Yeah, virtues are insanely interesting. As a non-philosophical person, I thought that they would be so boring, but they're like the most accessible self-help anything because they're true. They're true and they're good. They're beautiful. So ultimately education is about growth and virtue. Yeah. So we spend a lot of time thinking, what does my child need most right now, this week, this month? You know best and you can provide it for them. So maybe this week, like, we have something so exciting coming up at the end of the week and the kids are just like insane. This may not be the best time to like push them on math or push them on anything formal. This might be the time to get out the science experiments or do some cooking or something like that. Yeah. Rather than like everyone's crying, including mom. Yeah. And everybody's standing in a corner, has got their heads down on the desk because we can't get through this because the kids are so excited. It's Christmas or,
to hear, that education really boils down to helping kids grow in virtue. I think a lot of people would generally accept that as just sort of a generic truism, but like, let's break open just a little bit of what that means. What a virtuous action means is not just that it's prudent and just and courage and temperate, the traditional lists of virtues, but for something to be virtuous, it also has to be something free, right? When you're helping someone else grow in virtue, it means you're helping them make free choices to do the good. The free choice to stand up to their fears in terms of courage, or to temper a desire in terms of temperance. If it's not free, it's not really virtue. And sometimes it's necessary when you're parenting to inhibit some freedom, right? Like sometimes you have to put up gates, or you have to yank a kid out of, oncoming traffic or whatever.
Or tell a 3-year-old no.
Right. Like that's part of parenting. But the larger and more important goal of parenting is to helping your kids grow in virtue. That is to help them grow in the free, habitual ability to choose the good. And so what that means practically, though, for something like education, is that you're always in this give and take of trying to understand what's the next right step for this kid, not what's 3 steps ahead or 10 steps ahead. In other words, pushing them too far, too hard, nor just making it easy, but helping them how do you identify what's the right next step for them?
Mm-hmm.
And so again, like we were talking about reading, like grease that groove with a lot of real fun reading, make it real easy, and then gently give them something that pushes them a little bit further. But you're always trying to help them make that next step.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just, it's more important to have this dialogue and to get to know them and to help them take steps that are appropriate to them than it is to help them adhere to a system that's outside of them.
Yeah. And it's amazing because when you learn your kids' likes, dislikes, prejudices even, like we were doing a unit study on the kidney or the renal system the other day. And the kids loved it. The kids loved it. We had a long conversation about sphincters and the brain sphincter connection, and it was great. But they also have this prejudice against our new water filter. They loved the Berkey. We got an AquaTrue, and they remind us every day that they liked the Berkey better.
Yeah.
Okay?
Mom, here's my current list of why this new water filter is terrible.
Is
and
not
we need
as
to go back
good
to the old one.
as the other one.
I have 10 reasons. Go.
So I didn't realize we had to include the children in our choice of water filters.
It's not a conversation we thought we needed to have. Yeah.
But because we were studying the renal system and the filtration of urine, like we learned how the AquaTrue worked too. And now the kids are like super excited. And I did it on purpose because they have a prejudice against the AquaTrue. And we watched videos on how it works and the different levels of filtration. And we filtered some water and we learned safety tips about touching the filters and things like that. And it was because I knew my kids.
Mm-hmm.
No one could have made that lesson for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I know my house, I know my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And we brought the best out of that.
And you
situation.
could have done that lesson at a different time and context, and they wouldn't have given a flying rip about it.
Mm-hmm.
But because you're like right now, this is
everyone hates
this is a good lesson for right now. Because everyone hates the water filter. Yeah.
Yeah. We did not broach the question of whether or not you could put urine in the AquaTrue and filter it. I'm surprised that didn't come up.
You dodged a bullet there, babe.
Wow. So we'll leave that to the AquaTrue specialists.
Yeah.
So I'm realizing why I'm having such a hard time with these notes. You snuck your notes in there. They don't mean anything to me.
Pretty sneaky. Sorry.
So true growth, I'm assuming you wrote this, is what is important, not meaningless educational milestones. And knowing your child, learning your child, you'll see when they grow. And we have an excellent homeschool evaluator. Like you can either, in the state of Ohio, you can either do standardized tests at the end of every year or have a licensed homeschool evaluator evaluate your kids. And he and his wife homeschooled their 7 kids, and he's done homeschool evaluations for decades. And like he's really excellent at assessing whether or not this child has grown in their education over the course of the year and in all the necessary learning your child too also allows you to know when you can drop subjects and pick them up later. And I didn't realize you could do that. I thought you had to do like all 7 or however many, 9, 8, whatever, required subjects. And then everything on top of them. Well, just all the time, like in a block schedule kind of thing. But the reality is you can drop subjects and teach them over the course of their life.
Yeah.
So it's that in and of itself made homeschooling so palatable to me, because I felt like if I'm banging my head up against a wall to try to get this kid at this age to do this math, like maybe it's not we take them back a book and do remedial math. Maybe it's just this kid needs to mature. A lot of maturing can happen in 4 months.
Well, in my example of that, we talked last episode about this math curriculum. They really like Life of Fred. And it's a lot of reading based. It's a lot of conversational with this math teacher author, through these stories and introducing these concepts. And a lot of not specifically math content comes through these books. And there has been a couple times in the last few years where we were really just going strong on these math books, like reading through them together, reading them aloud, talking about different concepts, certainly working through the math and ironing that out, but just having great conversations and enjoying it. and then so then there's this question of like, okay, well, we're spending a lot of time on this and I'm not getting as much done on all these other subjects that I want to do. And there were times that I made the conscious choice, you know what, we're going to not worry about that right now because we're deriving so much on a variety of modalities from this math program. We're just going to double down on this and just make the while we have this momentum, we're just going to get through as much of it as we can. And Dominic, our eldest, he progressed a lot in that program, but not just in math, in lots of other things that were just coming through that. And so again, that's okay. It's actually you brought another question. I think maybe the Full Weilers might have talked about this in their episode, but like, it's okay to pick one subject that a kid is really excelling at right now, that's giving them a lot of confidence, that's really like opening up their creativity in their mind and exciting them, and just like doubling down on that one right now.
Yeah.
Like it's fine to do that. Do that for a few weeks. Just like get them really confident, really excited about learning. You can always go back to the other stuff.
Yeah. For a long time, Lucy was into maps. And she went through like first grade through sixth grade.
Yeah.
All of the map workbooks. Like she finished the entire thing within 1 year because she was just so into maps. And I wasn't going to be like, no kid, you can pick up maps next year when it's age appropriate for you.
Yes.
And then our Cecilia, she's in second grade. It doesn't matter.
All the grades are made up and the rules don't matter.
You should see our kids. They're like deer in headlights. They like look at me when someone's like, what grade are you in? They're like, danger. I don't know how to answer this question.
2-ish. Oh,
yeah. Like, I don't know. So she's really into handwriting and she's surpassed the other children in their workbooks for the particular curriculum where we get our handwriting books. Like she's passed them because she's just really into handwriting. And I'm not going to say, no, save that for tomorrow.
Yeah.
If you want to sit at the table for 4 hours and just do nothing but handwriting, go for it.
I'm having a disciplinary problem right now because oftentimes when we're dealing with some disobedience or some bad attitudes, my gentle parenting consequence is to have them do copy work. Like, okay, you're gonna copy 100 words out of the Bible today. Here's your section you got to do. And Cecilia's like, Dad, I just love doing copy work. I love writing. I love when you give me words. And I'm like, oh, this is not working for you. Thankfully, she doesn't.
Stand in the corner.
She doesn't need a lot of discipline.
No writing for the rest of the day.
You are not allowed. Yeah.
So there's a couple good books that I think are helpful for learning your child. One of them is, I think it's called The Temperament God Gave Your Kids. And that was invaluable to me because we got a sanguine choleric for our first kid. And that's like getting punched in the face when they're like 3.
With love, punched in the face.
Well, no, with with everything. Temper tantrums, biting, spitting in your face, passion. Just passion. Yeah. Passionately happy, passionately angry. Yeah. So that the temperament God gave your kids is super helpful. You mentioned the love languages.
Yeah, I know our buddy Mark Barnes likes to dig on that. He likes to make fun of that.
But I mean, like it does have some practical applications.
Yeah. Like I think the main helpful thing that for this, because as you talked about earlier, is just recognizing that different people experience love in different ways or ways that are more meaningful to them. Some people love to give and receive gifts. That is just not me.
Not me.
That stresses me the heck out. I'm just
getting gifts stresses me out. Giving gifts stresses me out.
But our daughter Lucy, she loves trinkets and gifts and making cards and like it's just her whole mindset is that. And so it's helpful because it's just recognizing that sometimes you have to show love or help to motivate or help to encourage in a way that makes sense to that person, even
or not
if it's
shut down their love.
Right. So it's helpful like, in
what
that
am I supposed
and having
to do with this
more empathy for the way other people experience things,
which is not my strong suit. So those books were both helpful.
Yeah.
So number two. So learning your child.
Okay.
I'm sure we could ramble more about that, but learning yourself. To me, this one almost even comes number 1, learning yourself. Kids love to learn. They learn and they, mimic and they can really take control of their education. They're interested, they're passionate, and I mean that, I don't mean we're letting them take control of their education, but they're just born to learn. They're born to learn and they will. But learning yourself, I guarantee you, the flaws you think you have are not actually the flaws that you have. And you're going to learn those through parenting. And if you choose homeschooling, through homeschooling, and they're going to scare the crap out of you. So learning yourself, let's talk about that.
Yeah, break that open for us. Yeah.
I don't know how to start it. So so we mentioned the checkout girl earlier. Was it in this episode? Where like overwhelmed?
Episode, yeah.
Okay. Well, just that you likely, if you're listening to this, have enough education to give your child an elementary education. If you can read, there are homeschool curriculums that will tell you exactly what to say, exactly where to put your finger, and how to teach your kid. Okay. You're capable of teaching your child. Your fears, my fears, are like the number one reason I can't teach my child. Okay. Or I can't teach my child that particular day, or it's February and it's not February right now. Yeah. It might be when this airs. The number one reason why I can't homeschool my kid right now in February is because I'm afraid that I'm failing. We're failing. Everyone's going to make fun of me. I thought I was impatient and I thought I was perfectionist, but in reality, I'm just vain and afraid of what everyone thinks about me. And so since we're virtue people, vanity as opposed to pride. So vanity is caring about what other people think of you.
A desire to be seen well, to be viewed well.
Yeah. And that's very different from perfectionism. Perfectionism is a pride thing. It really is like, I need to have this perfect. My kids need to be perfect. Vanity is, my kids just embarrassed me at church. We don't practice church. We should practice church. We should be at home and the kids should know all the things and they should behave perfectly at church, because if not, I'm failing and everybody's going to know I failed and I shouldn't have had this many children. Like this is vanity.
Yeah.
This is vanity, or like, they're all right. We shouldn't have been open to life and accepted all these children because I can't even sit down and homeschool without someone coming. Like it's fear.
A lot of Catholics are familiar with Dr. Ray Guarendi.
Sorry.
He talks about, parenting, and one of his things is you're a better parent than you think. The rash of modern, psychologists and psychoanalysts and people writing books about parenting and the school system have given you a lot of this self-doubt that, I don't know how to parent him. I must be doing it wrong. And I can't possibly teach my kid. A lot of that you have to just recognize is this baggage, because you're a better parent than you think. You're a better educator than you think you can be. And again, as you said, a lot of it comes down to instilled fears in you. And they might be very vain fears. Like, I'm just afraid of people thinking I'm not a good parent, or thinking I'm not a good educator. And it makes you forget that, but I actually know my kid really well. And I know what level they're at. And I know what helps motivate them. I know what the appropriate next step for is.
So like, I think a lot of people might say something like, I'm afraid my kids will fail in the future. I'm afraid. And if you kind of push that, like I push myself a little bit, I'm like, what am I really afraid of? Am I afraid that my child will starve? Well, I'm not afraid of that. Am I afraid that like, they're not going to get enough education for them to have a good, stable job and no, I'm not really afraid of that either. No. I'm afraid of my child resenting me for the education I gave them and not choosing to send them to school. And in the future, they're going to say, Mom, you sucked and my education sucked. But first of all, the reality is your kids are going to resent you. I guarantee you. Your kids will resent you for any number of things. Yeah. Okay? So get prepared for that. And
they may or they won't. But,
they're the same things that we resented our parents for in the goodness of our hearts when we were like, we're going to be perfect parents. And then you get into parenting and you're like, I totally understand why my mom was swearing like a sailor to get us out of the house every day.
Kids who go to public and real school, they never resent their parents. I've definitely seen that.
No. So that's good. No, that's good. Because what you're seeing is like, is this fear really something I can control? No, my kids are probably going to resent me for something. They're going to misunderstand my good intentions in some way, right? Okay, so that's not really something to be that terribly afraid of. So kind of like push your fears, push your fears, and then find yourself with your spouse and your faith, okay? With the church, the catechism has awesome sections on family. I think it's 22 something in there. I had it written down, but not in this notes. And with your spouse, and make your mountaintop goals. Okay. And keep those in mind. Okay. So mountaintop goals would be asking yourself questions like, what do I want my children to become?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What do I want my children to become? Okay. I actually wrote down my answer to that. Is that not just rhetorical?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
so
curious.
my thought is like, okay, what do I want them to become? I went to a college prep school, and I guarantee you a lot of the girls who were successful in that school
Mm-hmm.
are unhappy and maybe even vicious people. Okay. So that's not what I don't want a perfect best education. I don't want a prep school. I don't want them to go to Harvard necessarily. Okay. I want them to be resilient in their education. I want them to love learning and to think that they can look at a goal and say, how do I get to this goal? How do I educate myself to get to this goal? Okay. I want that for their education.
It's almost like we often dream too small.
Yeah. Yeah. Harvard is too small.
We're looking at these practical mid-level steps, but we're not really thinking, no, but in the end, what do I really want for my child, for my marriage, for my family? And if we actually look at those and work backwards, we recognize, a lot of the things we thought were really important, really necessary, really aren't. And they might actually be counterproductive.
Because in the moment, it's those things that ground you and that take you out of, they're going to resent me. Everyone's going to hate me. Everyone's going to think I'm a failure. I'm already a failure. I have already ruined my kids. Okay. What takes you out of the moment is, okay, I want to have resilient, lifelong learners. Okay. I want my kids to be virtuous. Is like smashing them with this math page right now while they're crying and I'm crying or I'm yelling or whatever. Is that going to build virtue? Crying. I don't know. Maybe if I just say, we're done with school today, go outside. And maybe that's even better.
And the 10-second summary, what's virtue? That means people who can think and approach reality and make decisions, people who recognize the relationships they live in, to God, to spouse, to neighbor, and they understand those relationships, they work within them. People who know what their fears are and have faced their fears. People who know what their desires are and have tempered those desires. That education has to grow them in those, or the education in the end won't matter. And all that, those ways of just being in life.
Yeah. I want my kids to be full of joy.
Yeah.
I don't want my kids to be happy. I want them to be full of joy in their life. I want them to be joyful alone. I want them to be joyful with other people, like just fountains of joy. Okay. I can think of a million days in my home life where I have not been a fountain of joy. And those are probably days when I should have made a different decision, right? Is, again, smashing this curriculum right now. Like, is this worth it?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Good. What you said, able to make free decisions. Are they able to make free decisions?
Yeah.
Are they not pressured or enslaved decisions?
Yeah.
Are they stable for their spouse, their family, and their community?
Yeah.
I want a stable child.
Yeah.
I don't want a child that's led around by whims or fears, their own fears or their own insecurities.
Can I throw one in there that's connected to the make decisions? Like, I want kids who can stand up for themselves and for others. Again, we have all this concern in our culture today about, out in the pop culture about sexual abuse, about the Me Too movement, all these kind of things out there in the world. But so many of our ways of educating children just have them kind of like herded into systems and going with the herd and going with the status quo and going with the fads and styles of the culture. I want kids who can think for themselves and think through and communicate an opinion and stick to it and not just simply be swayed by their peers.
So it took me a long time to realize that disagreeableness is not always a bad thing.
Yeah.
In fact, it's a very good thing.
Yeah, you need to be able to disagree.
We have a very disagreeable child. We may have more, but like in terms of older children, we have a very disagreeable child. And she is embarrassing to me often. Again, that's my vanity. But then we have a child who is not disagreeable. Very amicable, amiable?
Agreeable.
Agreeable. Yeah. Okay. You're right. Agreeable. And I worry that she will not be able to stand up for herself when she needs to, or she will not get out of a situation if she needs to. And so I used to be embarrassed, solely embarrassed by that child and happy with the child who just was quiet and was like, yes, I'll, whatever, mommy, I will clean for you. So you're happy, mommy, and the other kid is like to strangers, hey,
how you doing?
Why are you looking at me? And you're like, why do you have to be, you know what I mean? Like I saw that as something really negative and it made me really self-conscious. And there were many days where I was like, she'd be better off at a school because they would kind of like not whip her out of it, but you know what I mean? Like they would whitewash her.
When I'm caught up in vanity, I get really worried about those things.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm at my better moments, when I'm really concerned with that child's virtue,
Mm-hmm.
I see those things and I recognize they need to be curbed. But my orientation is helping them to funnel that in the right direction. So like with the more disagreeable child,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, we recognize that she has this, she reacts too quickly. She can have outbursts, but it's helping her focus that energy into good things. And we've seen a lot of maturity, a lot of growth in that child, of her tempering that self-reflection. But she's going to be one who, again, she's going to need to temper that a little bit, but she's going to be one who stands up for herself and for others, and who's going to be able to be strong and speak her mind. The other girl, again, she's had to be encouraged in courage, right? Mm-hmm. And to stand up when it's time to be able to speak clearly and what she likes and dislikes. And we've seen growth in her as well. And that's, again, that comes from getting to know that child and ourself, setting aside our fears so we can just help that kid grow further in their own kind of journey of virtue.
Another way that I have learned myself. So just to put this out there, like when I finally decided I wanted to homeschool.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the other episode, the first episode we talked about, I wasn't homeschooled. I came to it kicking and screaming. I never wanted to do it. It was the ultimate patriarchy and I was staying home or whatever. I don't know, whatever I thought when I was thinking it. But when I finally decided and embraced and wanted with my whole heart, my whole freedom to homeschool, I began sitting down with our kids and having actual panic and anxiety attacks that would cause headaches for days. Like, can't breathe. Like I'm having a panic attack. And I wrestled with God. I was like, God, you changed my heart 180 degrees. Why is this the next? Like, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. Like, I've assented to the thing that we've discerned that you want for us, like, and our family. Like, what is going on? But I was spending my time focusing not on the present moment with the children, or with expectations that didn't make any sense, So questions I had to begin to ask myself would be like, am I focusing too much on my future and not on the present moment? Am I focusing on this child right now? Or am I focusing on how it's going to be another day ruined because I can hear the other kids in the other room, they're getting fussy and they're going to bust out here and they're going to ruin this. Like, am I certain that I have already failed my kids and ruining their future? Or is this workbook page just really boring for this kid today? Are they too young and we can try this again in a few months? Am I a horrible teacher? Or did this kid just not sleep well or ate crappy over the holiday? I was really focusing on my fears and, again, my vanity. Like, everyone's right. I would say this a lot. Everyone's right. I can't do this. I should just send them to school. I am the worst person to be around my kids, and I can see it. I can see all my flaws on them, and I am the worst. And it was causing me to have physical reactions of panic. And what we did was, A, you took over homeschooling. That was when you took over homeschooling. And B, we just took a huge break. And we started doing kind of like unschooling, where I was just focusing on, they were little, so like Charlotte Mason-ish nature stuff. Like, we would just go out to parks. Yeah. We would spend time outside. I was learning the children more. You were taking over certain aspects of the education and keeping them on a schedule and keeping their chores going, and I took a break to learn myself and how I interact with my children and kind of begin to recognize the pitfalls. Do you remember that time?
I do. And what kind of comes to mind in a lot of these examples is that, like, again, what is even more important to kind of the foundation of what comes even before the formal schooling we do with our kids is our family and our family culture. And that, the vast majority of the real impact that we have on our kids is not going to be the formal schooling we do with them, the workbooks that they do or they complete and they do a test, whatever. It's going to be our family culture, whether it was, all told, whether it was good relationships, love, joy, prayer,
forgiveness.
Forgiveness. See, that's another, I was just thinking of that. Like, we've been through a lot of this stuff. And it's easy to look at that, in the moment or even in our example and be like, well, that's pretty messy. I don't know about that. But it's working through that has been this great thing. We do
it
this
builds
thing.
resiliency in your children.
It does. We do this thing when we pray night prayer together as a family in the evenings. That if you know night prayer in the book, in the breviary, there's a small piece of it where you pause and do an examination of conscience, and then you pray the Confiteor, and then you go on with the Psalms and all that. Well, we pause during the Confiteor, or before the Confiteor, the examination of conscience, and we say, okay, it's time for apologies. And we don't really go around, but it's the opportunity for all members of the family to say, hey, I'm sorry for yelling at you earlier today, or sorry for taking your toy, and they forgive each other. And we have to apologize a lot to each other and to our kids. And that's part of this cycle. That cycle of doing things together as a family, including education, making lots of mistakes, apologizing for those mistakes, and then working to do better. That again builds these resilient relationships over time that we all really treasure,
Yeah, we had a priest over once. We were doing night prayer. And I was like, I'm sorry, kids, for yelling at you guys today. And the kids were all like, oh yeah, Mom, you yelled like 90 times. You yelled so, and they all they were just like, they were like little bees that clung to me, hugging me, like, we forgive you, Mommy. We forgive you. And I'm just like, they really were like, yeah, 90 times, like really yelled. We were leaving the house. That was so bad.
You really did yell at them, didn't you?
And then to hear the little 3-year-olds, the little kids, they remember when they've done bad.
Yeah.
Like the little one will be like, what did David say the other day? He was like,
he can barely even talk.
Yeah. And it was something like, I'm sorry I took the iPad or something like that. Or I'm sorry I kicked Mina in the face or something like that, where you're just like, I didn't even know you did that, but you carried that. He carried that with him that day. And for him as a little 3-year-old to carry that around, say it out loud and get a hug and a forgiveness, it's incredible.
And so a summary point that I would just make there is that, family life is always playing the long game, both the long game in this life as well as in eternal life. And there's just, you don't know if you're going to get tomorrow or next year or next decade to build and rebuild your relationships with your family, your own father and mother, your siblings, your children. And so it has to start now. And so again, homeschooling isn't for everybody, but its messiness and the fact that it puts you in a pressure cooker and stuff comes out, that can be a benefit, that messiness, because it forces some of your own baggage out in the open that then you can address and apologize for and repair, so that you're building over time. You're building the relationship that you want to have with your children and your spouse and your family members for the rest of your life and afterlife. Yeah.
I have this written down. This is not going to be a nice transition.
Okay.
Oh no, this is the next section, learning your home environment. Do we want to go there?
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm sure we'll double back to some of these points. But.
Go to confession, say I'm sorry. You probably don't yell any more than I do. So we're in this together. So this, learning your home and your environment is just, it's more of what we've been talking about, of your marriage comes first. You learn each other. You work with each other. You two dream together and set your standards for your household, your hopes for your children, your hopes for their education, whatever you choose, whatever way you choose to educate them.
Yeah.
You are dreaming together as spouses. You're standing shoulder to shoulder and you're setting the culture for your family, and you're working at the culture and you're working at your habits. And then stepping back from the systems and letting your own household develop its own culture and its own church, its own lowercase worship. Okay. So stepping back from the systems, I think, is really, really important Okay. It doesn't mean, and this is just as important as stepping back from the systems, knowing that you can put those systems back in place. So I think sometimes when people are like, you're going to throw out all the standards and you're just going to do whatever. Well, maybe it takes throwing out the standards, learning your kids, learning yourself, and then saying, this is a standard I am going to put back into place. This is a system that we are going to step back into and see how it goes. Okay. So you can take it one semester at a time. All right. Schools will be happy to take your children back. And in fact, it is the public school's job to take your children back. I think people think like homeschooling is a full life choice that's going to last forever.
And maybe they won't let us come back. Or we'll have to come crawling back and beg to be let back into the school system.
Back. They're going to take you back. So if you want to try it for a semester,
it is your right.
You can take it one semester at a time. You can take it one subject at a time. You can introduce one subject and just and see how that system works for you. You don't have to know what curriculum you're going to do the first day of school and carry through it no matter what. In fact, I guarantee you, you will drop so much money on the perfect curriculum for you and realize a week in that it is absolutely impossible for you to teach this to your child. Okay. And you're just going to have to suck it up that you spent that kind of money and deal with it.
Can I actually want to make a comment? I was thinking about this when I was going through our notes before the program, that, the question might arise like, well, okay, so you're talking about systems over here and the problem with systems, but really in another sense, you're talking about building your own family system here. I think we need to distinguish between a top-down system that takes the individual for granted and a system that builds from the bottom up with the individual as part of it. And that the difference, we might say the difference between again, an authoritarian system versus a culture. I mean, think about what it means to have a culture, for a culture to develop in a town or in a country or in a family. That is a system that grows organically by virtue of those relationships over time. It's not something that can be imposed. In fact, actually, you discover this as a parent or as a home educator, that you can't simply just plop down a system or a curriculum, as you're talking about, and just assume it's going to work and just force people through it. It doesn't work like that. Your family culture, your traditions, your relationships, they have to be this give and take, because your children and your spouse are other free human beings. And so that what develops out of that is this organic culture rather than merely a system. And so there is a distinction to be made there between systems that take you for granted as just a cog within them and a system that develops out of your relationships.
When the school shutdowns happened, there were a lot of parents who were asking homeschoolers for advice. Okay, so that was number one. But then number two, just being like, I don't know how to all of a sudden start working from home and schooling my kid on this computer, and it takes so long. And it's like, how do I do this? Please, homeschooler, tell me how to do this.
Spend an hour trying to put this worksheet into the internet.
I know people didn't want to hear this.
Yeah.
But I was like, just don't do it. Yeah. Don't do it. Tell them no. Tell them as long as school is shut down, we're just not doing any of it. Yeah. They're like, but my kid will be behind. They won't be behind. And you know what? With this level of disruption, they're all just going to do a summary as soon as you get back to school anyway. Yeah. Because everybody schooled at home just like you and didn't know what the heck was going on and how to work the system or make the dragon blow fire on the math problem that you just accomplished for 30 seconds before you can move on to the next math problem.
Wait, I think I have to install an update. Just a second.
So, but that confidence wasn't like, I'm sitting here thinking, screw you, system, I'm going to make your life hard. It was a healthy, we pulled back and we were outside of this system. And therefore you're able to give this advice of okay, think about this realistically. If everyone is in the same boat, you can take a step back. Your kid will be okay.
Yeah, just have them read.
But that was only because I could take a step back from a system. It's similar to at another point in our life, we decided to be on a single income at the beginning of our marriage, and we were very poor. That decision made us very poor. But we also didn't buy a house in a city that we no longer live in, right? So we didn't enter into the system of like mortgage and like home repairs and like all this stuff that would have made it difficult for us to make free actions. You know, like you wanted to get your master's, and so we could just up and leave, right? We didn't have to sell our house. We didn't have to worry about a mortgage. We didn't have to worry about quitting a job and finding another job for me. You know, like when you take a step back from systems, you can choose when you're going to put them back into your life. Okay. So you're not just saying, screw you, system. You're saying, we're taking a step back.
Yeah.
I'm taking a vacation from my problems, a vacation from you, system. That's what about Bob?
Gotta have the what about Bob reference. Let me make a quick Catholic reference that, you know, what we're talking about here is the principle, what Catholic social teaching would call the principle of subsidiarity. And it's not that there isn't a place for these higher level rungs of society, different levels of system or government or society, but it's that it's very easy, especially when there's difficulties in the world, for the lower levels of society, the individual, the marriage, the family, the local community, to cede its power upward, and it's hard to get that back. And so you always need to retain on your level of society the power and responsibility that you can, that's proper to your level. And again, these decisions about, you know, having freedom in terms of your living situation, the systems that you're involved in, the educational system, you have to maintain a healthy sense of freedom for those. You're not beholden to them. They're beholden to you. They're there to serve you as a citizen, as an individual. And so you got to kind of keep a healthy, you know, give and take distance from those so that you can engage in them when they're helpful, but also be able to say, you know what, we're taking a step back if it's not working for us. Yeah.
So we're always troubleshooting our environment. So we're learning your home and your environment and your culture. So we're always troubleshooting. Okay. Yeah. So maybe a homeschooling room sounded great. A homeschooling room in the basement with all the perfect things sounded great. But in reality, nobody wants to be in a basement without windows all day. So we end up doing it around the kitchen. Yeah. So that was kind of, you know, like we're troubleshooting with earplugs, with headphones, with seat dividers, you know, to keep kids from looking and fussing each other. You know, individual computers or tablets with headphones when they're doing, you know, foreign languages or online things.
Versus binders. This is a hill I will die on.
Which side are you on?
This is what I don't know. Which side are you on? Notebooks.
Ugh, binders.
You can always put it in the binder later, but notebook keeps it from getting ripped out and lost in the short term.
I think it's just a man-woman thing.
It might be.
But I mean, like the point is you can always troubleshoot. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So one of our pieces of advice a lot of times when actually this would be in the Q&A later. Well, so we're just always troubleshooting. Yeah. Okay. So is this where we want to end this episode?
Sure. Well, let's make some summary points here. Again, the point, our focus on this episode, the focus of this whole little mini series, I guess, that we're doing here on homeschooling. Again, this is not the end all be all how to homeschool. There's lots of other great resources, formal resources out there. Our point here is that helping you to, I guess, inviting you into our journey and our thought process so that you can rethink your own mental narratives about education, about your parenting, about your home life. Because in the end, the point is not that you're going to homeschool. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But like you could, like you have that option, you have that freedom, and you could do a darn good job of it if you thought that was best for your kids. And then even if you don't, that even around it, you still want to grasp and hold on to your responsibility and your right and your ability as a parent to be the one who evaluates your child and recognizes what the next best step is for them and insists that the systems that they're engaged in are really serving them and that you have the freedom to step back if they're not working right now.
Yeah. So I mentioned this in the first episode. I just want to mention it again. A lot of times when people ask what are great resources for homeschooling, I think the absolute best 2 hours you could possibly spend to learn about this topic is called The Secrets of Joe Schooling by Jennifer Fulwiler. put that into Google. It's a 2-hour-long podcast,
Her
The
and her
Secrets
husband.
of Joe Schooling. She's a comedian. It'll be very entertaining, and they're very rational, logical people.
Yeah.
And
And
then
a very empowering discussion. You're just like,
Yeah,
oh
yeah.
okay, this isn't as complicated as I was thinking it was.
Yeah. Unschooling. Another one is a YouTube video called Unschooling Explained on the channel Norp, KNORP, and South, Norp and South. Unschooling. Reminds me of like when Leslie Knope is drunk.
I love that episode. Do you love that episode? That's a great episode.
It's snake juice, snork juice. That's what it was. That's what it was. So it's not just about unschooling. They really go through their thought process of how they came to hating the idea of homeschooling, and then seeing how it could be possible and also very helpful for their family of 11. So, okay, next part 3 will be practicals, advice, and Q&A.
Yeah.
So thank you. You usually sign off, so you sign off. You're the pro.
Again, thank you for joining us for this episode of Elevate Ordinary. If you check out elevateordinary.com, you can find our past episodes, archives, information about the show. Also, send us an email at elevateordinary@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your thoughts about schooling, about family culture, about marriage, this stuff. Again, this is a conversation about, all the little ways that we can grab the ordinary, elevate it, recognize God in it, recognize the ways he's inviting us to be the saints that he's created us to be, how to grow in virtue through those little things, those little ordinary aspects of life. That's what this is about. We'd love to keep having that conversation with you. So we'll see you again next week. God bless.